Hello everybody and welcome to the Import-Export Hub channel. Your host Bogdan here. I hope that you are all enjoying your moment, and guys, without anything else to add here, let's dive into today's subject, in which I will cover the imports and the exports for Indonesia in order to see together what drives Indonesia's foreign trade, to whom it exchanges goods, and as usual, where possible, I will try to give you a couple of examples in order to pinpoint the exact import or export driver towards a certain country. But before I get into the numbers here, the boring numbers, I would like to give you a couple of facts about Indonesia. So it has roughly 270 million people, is Southeast Asia's largest economy, at least in GDP, with a GDP of almost $1.2 trillion for 2021. And even though the economy somehow contracted in 2020, as everywhere in the world really, in 2021 rebounded thanks to a favorable growth in the global demand, coupled with a gradual improvement in the domestic demand as well, which for me is very, very important. Indonesia is strategically located on one of the world's major trade routes and has extensive natural resources like coal, natural gas, or gold. In terms of market opportunities, personally, I think that consumer-related products represent the biggest opportunities for companies wanting to enter the Indonesian market, which, by the way, at the moment, guys, is the fourth most populated country in the world after China, India, and the United States. In terms of free trade agreements, Indonesia is member of ASEAN. In terms of bilateral free trade agreements, these are numerous, but in force there is only one with Chile. And recently it seems that Indonesia concluded negotiations also with South Korea. In pending status, if you want, so still negotiating. The most important ones are with the European Union, India, and Turkey. And I will give you one more interesting fact about Indonesia. So it's the largest exporter of palm oil in the world, with some $26.6 billion worth of exports in 2021. And now, guys, with this short introduction about Indonesia, let's take a look at the numbers here. I will start with Indonesia's exports, overall exports, with 2021 as the reference year, so to say. And we see that mineral fuels and oils represent the largest export drivers, some $45 billion. It was followed by animal or vegetable fats and oils, in which the palm oil exports had a big contribution, big one. And on the third spot, we have here iron and steel chapter with almost $21 billion worth of exports. Of course, in this top 10 list, we have other big export drivers, but I will mention just, I don't know, chapter 87, 26, or 64 here. And relative to the year-on-year changes, we have almost 40% positive change overall, again, with almost top 10 chapters having positive figures, except chapter 85 here, who contracted with some 8%. But overall, we see strong numbers coming from the rest of them, especially from the top 3 chapters, who all had absolute positive changes above the $10 billion mark. Now, moving to the top 10 import drivers, chapter 27, 84, and 85 are the main ones for 2021, followed by iron and steel, plastics, I don't know, organic chemicals, cereals are on the 9th spot, while chapter 23 is the 10th largest import driver with almost $4 billion. Relative to the year-on-year changes here, 2021 had a 38% expansion in relative terms, with all top 10 sectors having positive figures. As for the balance of trade, well, Indonesia had a positive balance of trade of roughly $2.5 billion, with only 3 chapters from the import flow having a positive balance of trade, and these are chapters 27, 72, and 87, basically where Indonesia has a big comparative advantage. And now, guys, with both flows being briefly covered, I will now cover the top 5 for each flow in order to see Indonesia's trading partners as well. And I will begin with chapter 27 for the export flow. And we see that the exports are relatively regional in scope, with, I don't know, China, India, and Malaysia being the largest destinations. But of course, we have other important ones like, I don't know, Japan, Thailand, or Vietnam, to name a couple from this top 10 list. The year-on-year change was positive, some 76% in relative terms, and more than $19.5 billion in absolute ones. China having the largest contribution, both in relative and absolute terms. But we have here other big positive changes. The most important ones, if you ask me, happening in relation with Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, and the Philippines. All these countries with figures above the $1 billion mark. Relative to the main drivers, I have here 2 examples, one for India and the other one for Japan. For the former, the main import driver was coal, while for the latter, the main import driver was bituminous coal, so subheading 270112. Moving now to the second largest export driver for Indonesia, again 2021 as the reference here. We have here chapter 15, animal or vegetable fats. 2021 was a great year in terms of exports, if you ask me, some $33 billion, with China, India, and Pakistan as the main destinations, followed by others like, I don't know, the United States, Bangladesh, or Egypt, again, to name just a couple from this top 10 list. In terms of year-on-year change, we have a positive change, some $12 billion in absolute terms. All these thanks to very good performances towards China here, Pakistan also, and why not the United States? All these countries with figures above the $1 billion mark. As for the main export driver, well, there is no surprise that palm oil was the main one, both towards Pakistan and the United States. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to see that this was the case for the rest of the top 10 partners as well. Moving now, guys, to the third largest export driver. Here we have chapter 72. So iron and steel with China, the recurrent China, Taiwan, and India as the largest trading partners. They were followed by other important ones like, I don't know, Italy, Turkey, or Thailand, again to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, we have again positive figures, with South Korea having the smallest change, roughly $15 million, while China, on the other hand, imported with almost $5.3 billion more in 2021 than in 2020. This is a good sign for both the exporting and the importing countries, as the intensiveness, if you want, in trading these products usually marks a positive industrial production, with spillover effects in the rest of the economy as well. Now, relative to the main drivers, it seems that subheading 721913 drove most of the exports towards Malaysia here, while subheading 721891 drove most of Indonesia's exports towards Italy. Jumping now to the fourth largest export driver, yes, the fourth one. We have chapter 87, so vehicles other than railway or tramway rolling stock, and we see that for 2021 Indonesia exported some $8.6 billion, with the Philippines here, Vietnam, and Thailand as the main destinations, followed by Japan, the United States, or the United Arab Emirates. Again, just to mention a couple from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, these were positive for all top 10 destinations, trading partners, with the Philippines, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Mexico as well having all figures above the $100 million mark. As for the main drivers, well, it seems that for both the Philippines and Vietnam, motorcycles with small engine capacity drove most of Indonesia's exports. So we have here subheading 871120. And now, guys, the fifth and the last chapter that I will cover from the export flow is chapter 87. So electrical machinery and equipment and their parts. We see that 2021 had 8% contraction, some $748 million, fewer exports than in the previous year, with the United States, Singapore, and Japan as well as the main destination, which were followed by other important ones like, I don't know, China, France, or South Korea. Again, to mention just a couple from this top 10 list. And except the United States, Singapore, and Japan, who all had positive figures relative to 2020, the rest of the top 10 partners had negative ones. The largest contraction happening in relation with South Korea, who imported with some $165 million less in 2021. As for the main drivers, it seems that lithium cells and batteries were the main driver towards China, while towards Thailand we have here subheading 850440, so static converters. And with this being also covered, guys, let's take a look at the top 5 import drivers. Chapter 27 is the main one with $6.8 billion worth of imports for 2021, with Singapore here, Malaysia, and Saudi Arabia as the main trading partners, followed by other important ones like, I don't know, the United States, Nigeria, or India. Relative to the year-on-year changes, guys, we have almost 83% positive change, some $13 billion if I were to put a dollar value to the percentage, with all the top 10 partners having positive numbers. As for the main drivers, well, from Malaysia, we have subheading 271012, while from the United States, the main import driver was subheading 271112, so liquefied propane. Jumping quickly to Indonesia's second import driver, we have here chapter 84, machinery and mechanical appliances with their parts. Again, a good indicator for the industrial activity, if you ask me. And we have here China, Japan, and Thailand as the largest trading partners, followed by other important ones like the United States, Singapore, or Germany. Again, to name just a couple from this top 10 list. The year-on-year changes were positive, some 18% in relative terms and more than $4 billion in absolute ones, with 4 partners having negative figures while the rest having positive ones. The largest positive change in absolute terms happening in relation with China, from which Indonesia imported in 2021 with some $3.6 billion more than it did the previous year, so 2020. As for the main drivers, at least in terms of imports, subheading 847331 was the main one for the imports coming from Singapore, while those coming from Germany were mainly driven by subheading 847780, so machinery for working rubber and plastics, as Indonesia has also big latex industry. And now guys, jumping to Indonesia's third largest import driver, we have here chapter 85, electrical machinery, electrical equipment and parts thereof. We see that in 2021, Indonesia imported some $22.3 billion, with China here, Singapore and Taiwan as the main trading partners, followed by others like, I don't know, Japan, Vietnam, or the United States. Relative to the year-on-year change, this was positive, some 17% in relative terms and some $3.2 billion in absolute ones, with only 3 countries registering negative values in this top 10 list, and these were Singapore, the United States, and Malaysia. The latter having also the biggest absolute negative change of roughly $90 million. On the other side of the spectrum, we see strong positive numbers coming from the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, and China, the latter registering the biggest absolute positive change of roughly $2.5 billion. As for the main import drivers, we see that from South Korea, these were driven mainly by subheading 854232, so electronic integrated circuits as memories, while from Thailand, the main driver was subheading 851220. Jumping now to the fourth biggest export driver, yes, the fourth one, we have here iron and steel chapter 72, with China, Japan, and South Africa being the largest partners in terms of value, followed by India, the Russian Federation, or Oman, to name just a couple from this top 10 list. And overall, we see that the year-on-year change was positive, some 74% in relative terms, which translates into $5 billion in absolute ones, with all the top 10 trading partners having positive changes, the largest, at least in absolute terms, happening again with China, some $1.5 billion more exports towards Indonesia in 2021. Now regarding the main drivers, well, each country basically with its own competitive advantage, and we have flat rolled products of alloy steel other than stainless and with a width larger or equal to 600 millimeters, which drove the imports from China, and subheading 72071 for the imports coming from India. And now guys, the fifth and last chapter that I will cover, bear with me a little longer, is chapter 39, plastics and articles thereof, with some $10.2 billion overall imports for 2021. And we have here China, Thailand, and Singapore as the main trading partners, followed by others like, I don't know, South Korea, Vietnam, or the United States, which is here on the 10th spot. Again, we see positive changes year on year with all the top 10 partners. The biggest increase in absolute terms happening in relation with China, who in 2021 exported with some $754 million more than the previous year. But there were big figures, if you ask me, also in relation with Thailand, Singapore, or South Korea as well. And relative to the main import drivers, we see that propylene copolymers in primary forms drove the imports coming from South Korea, while those from Japan were driven mainly by subheading 392690. So guys, finally, with this being said, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you've made it till the end of the video. Don't forget to hit whatever button you like below this video, and as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.